Yeah.
All right. So, welcome, Comadres, to the launch of our Las Comadres speaker series. We are so happy that you could join us tonight. Our speaker today is Sylvia Acevedo, and she will be introduced by our founder, Nora de Hoyos Comstock. We ask that everyone please mute your phones. If you have a question, you have a comment, please add it to the chat. Sylvia will talk for about half an hour, and then we will have Q&A. So if you think of a question, write it down, write it in the chat. We will get to it, okay? But in the meantime, you can leave your video on, but please turn your microphone off, okay? All right, so welcome. Nora, take it away.
Wonderful. Comadres, I am so very excited about this speaker series. And actually, to tell you the truth, all the many things that Comadre Maria Ferreira is making happen right now. It is so wonderful to have her energy and her passion. And she's bringing so many of you into the fold, because with this new technology and this ability to reach each other wherever we are, anytime, any place, then you can participate. You too can help to lead Las Comadres. And she's asking you to help support the vision, the movement forward. So please, if you have an idea, if you have passion to participate, let Maria know and she's going to put you to work. So it is my honor and really my privilege to introduce to you one of the most amazing women that I've ever met. I met Sylvia Acevedo here in Austin, Texas, and everybody still asks me about Sylvia. Where is she? What's she up to? When's she coming to see us? So let me tell you a little bit about my comadre Sylvia. She's a corporate board of director, C-suite executive, community leader, author, and rocket scientist. Devout believer in the power of transformation to change and improve lives, communities, organizations, and the world. What a comadre. Recognized leader whose innovation and growth strategies have been hallmarks in her career. She's the author of Path to the Stars, My Journey from Girl Scout to Rocket Scientist, which details her personal journey from the dirt streets of Las Cruces, New Mexico, to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the top executive tiers of Apple, Dell, IBM, Qualcomm, and other USA technology leaders. Most recently, she served as the CEO of Las Girl Scouts of the USA. Las Girl Scout, did you hear that? Chair of President Obama's White House Initiative for Educational Excellence for Hispanics in Early Childhood Leadership. Driver of the administration's early childhood dual language education policy. She's a national speaker on cybersecurity, workforce, and leadership. Welcome, Sylvia.
Oh, thank you so much, Nora. Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much for organizing it. And each one of you who's on the call, thank you for making the time today and tonight to be here. I really appreciate it. And I'm honored to be the inaugural speaker. So thank you for this opportunity, Nora, Maria, and all of you. So very much appreciate that. Tonight, I want to share with you, I'm very positive on 2021. No, it's got a lot of challenges. I want to share with you some of my thinking around that and, also help with you share some of the things that help me thrive. And maybe some of these could be useful for you and your family to help them thrive as well. I do see this moment is filled with a lot of opportunity. And I know a lot of you may not feel that way. So I want to share some thoughts around that. And so hopefully my comments tonight will inspire you and provide you some ideas about how you can plan and put a little bit more positive outlook and things that you can do that are under your control to make 2021 as positive as possible for you. And so there's going to be three parts of my talk. One is, you heard from Nora. So how did that person, White House commissioner, most excellent CEO of Girl Scouts, all this kind of stuff, how did I get from there? And, but I came from dirt roads in New Mexico. So I'll talk a little bit about that. but I'm also going to share with you some macro trends that are going on that I'm most familiar with. So in technology and in education as well. And especially education matters so much to us and Latinos. And then, I'll wrap up with, what can you focus on? And I'll talk about 7 steps, and I'll intersperse those steps throughout my talk to give you some kind of focus of maybe you can incorporate some of them in your life because they're really helpful and instrumental in my life. So how did I get to have all those amazing experiences? When you think about it, all my grandparents born in Mexico, my mom born in Mexico, my dad born in El Paso, casi Mexico, right? And we lived paycheck to paycheck. And sometimes we didn't have money and we had to go move in with family. When we finally got enough money, the only thing we could afford was a rent house on a dirt street. And, we struggled financially many times, but I was really fortunate. I was in the pilot of Head Start. I had great teachers, loved the library, had a good library in town, and I took advantage of it. And I was able to get into programs like Girl Scouts, music, and other things that really helped me develop my potential and to really start believe in myself and to get that kind of confidence. And, thanks to those programs, I was really able to transform and live my life potential. And that's that book that Nora was talking about, Path to the Stars. Also, I made sure that it came out in Spanish at the same time, Camino a las Estrellas. So one of the things that is just so important is, and I'm going to say this is step 1, is no matter what you want in your life, the first person you have to convince is yourself. And that's basically the confidence that you can do it. But before you can convince anyone, you've got to convince yourself. And once you've convinced yourself, nothing can stop you. You're invincible, but you've got to have that confidence in yourself. So that's step 1. And as Nora did say, I was a rocket scientist, and that was my first job out of college. And that's really pretty fantastic. And I was one of the first Latinos or Latinas to have gotten their graduate engineering degree from Stanford University. And I earned that degree right when Silicon Valley was taking off. But, even with a Stanford engineering degree, graduate engineering degree, it was really hard for me to get a job. There were like no Latinas in Silicon Valley doing that. And I finally got a job after many months at IBM, but I basically was doing layouts for office work. I'm like, okay, but I got my foot in the door and I didn't let that stop me. I really focused on getting the best skills I could get. And so on my own, I studied about computer-aided design. And when they first started to bring in computer-aided design, I raised my hand and I said, guess what? I already know how to use that. And they're like, how did you do that? We haven't trained anyone. And I said, well, I invested in myself. And as a result of that, I got put on the best projects that were kind of the hallmark of IBM. And so, and in San Jose. And so probably my step 2 is what I would say to people is really excellence as a differentiator. Always do more than what's required. And when you do it really well. I didn't have to learn about CAD. I could have said, oh, I'm not in a fast track job here at IBM and kind of said, woe is me. But instead, I saw what was happening. I invested in myself, and then I was able to really leapfrog. And, that initiative, that excellence, excellence continues to be a differentiator. So in your world, that to me is step 2. Now, throughout that experience in Silicon Valley, even in 2018, I tell people, 2018, they did research and less than 0.5% of executives in Silicon Valley were Latino. So if you think about it, that's almost like it doesn't exist, right? But yet decades ago, I was an executive, a Latina executive in Silicon Valley. And there were a lot of challenges, and it really did take extra effort for me to break through. I'll give you another example. Like when I was trying to break through into global. And I was thinking I should be a no-brainer. I'm doing great in sales. They want to grow in Latin America. Puedo hablar español. This is a no-brainer. I had the most difficult time breaking in. And I ended up having to create a report that showed that if the company had the same kind of results from major national company, major corporations that are in those markets like Procter and Gamble and others, that if they had the same market share in my accounts that we had in the US and Latin America and throughout Asia Pacific, they would grow by over hundreds of millions of dollars. And I created a report, and I got time with the senior vice president of sales by really not quite stalking him, but I tracked him down, got on that elevator, made that famous pitch, and he's like, okay, I'll give you a couple minutes. I mean, who's going to say, hey, I can grow your business by several $100 million, and here's a presentation. He's like, okay, I'll take time. So he listened to that, and he's like, love it, grabbed the presentation, and I put my hand on it. And he said, can't I have it? And I said, yes, you can, but it comes with me. And with that, I got that job and that great opportunity. So once again, it's one of those things of doing a little bit different. And so, but not just that, persistence. It took me months before I got that opportunity. Over and over, they told me I didn't have the right skill set. And then I'd see people that were monolingual being hired in. I'd see people that don't have the same kind of track record that I had, but I was persistent. And so that's really important, is don't give up, whether it's in technology or even, as Nora mentioned, I'm really proud of the fact, and it survived during the Trump administration, that the dual language policy that allowed curriculums to be used in pre-K paid for with federal dollars, that was a policy change. And I was dogged and persistent on that. And I don't know why, but there were people that were really against that. And we finally got it passed within the last few months of the Obama administration. And I'm proud to say that that hasn't changed. But what that did is allowed millions of dollars of curriculum, of federal dollars that could be used for curriculums for pre-K. So suddenly a kid comes into, Head Start or whatever, they could have a dual language program paid for with federal dollars. I'm really proud of that, but that required tremendous amount of persistence. Now, I will say I had a lot of fortune. I had the right skills, the right attitude, the right background, and landed in Silicon Valley and was able to really take advantage of that. But I want us to sort of take a moment and to think about, how about the right skills that are needed right now? And so to help you prepare and to think about that, I want to share some thoughts, especially around technology and around education. So what we're experiencing right now because of COVID really compressed the move to digital from something that would have normally taken 5 to 10 years into 1 year. And we're all living it. And by the fact that we can do the Zoom, that's a great example of it. But what I want you to realize is everything is being recoded. Everything, all the things that are around information are being completely redesigned, recoded. The world is being rewritten line by line, code by code. And I can't emphasize how important that transformation is. It isn't all utopia. There's a lot of challenging dystopian aspects of it. And that's why we have to be very involved. We have to be current, and we have to be able to understand how to use technology. Doesn't mean you have to become a digital native coder or anything like that, but you've got to be very proficient in technology, because that is the language that is really going to be so impactful. And we need to be able to speak that language and be involved in that language, not just as a user, but as a creator, inventor, and a designer. So that's step 4, is to really become digitally proficient. Now, not just ordering the Netflix series, that's important, but really understanding all of these online tools. Just don't be a passive user and say, oh, I want tech support to help me here. Really figure it out. You're going to depend on it. Your profession's going to depend on it. Your family's health is going to depend on it, because one of the things that's really happening with COVID is, what they used to call telemedicine, but basically it's all going remote. And to be able to provide your family with the best experiences, you've got to know the tools as well. So, you're going to have to get your own blood pressure cuff at home and your own thermometer so you can do your medical exams. And we might say, well, I'm going to wait until it goes back to how it was. And I got to tell you, it isn't. It isn't going to go back. And so I get it. After 2020, a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed, and you're not alone in your feeling. But, there is so much that's available to support you. And so I want you to take some time and stop and assess what is available to support you. There are a lot of great programs through certifications. You don't have to go back and become an engineer or become a programmer. There are a lot of micro classes that can really help you get the kind of training, the support, the certification you need to advance in your career, or to help you learn, another skill or another hobby, and you also don't have to take a formal class. When I was working up in my career, I really wanted to learn about corporate finance. And so I befriended somebody in corporate finance, and she said, I kind of want to know more about sales and marketing. So we helped one another. In fact, I'm still friends with her. But you can do that as well. Think about something you would like to learn about, and who can you get that you could be beneficial, that it's a win-win for both of you. I know in various times in my career, I've done that with other people who we coach each other. So don't think about this going alone. So that's probably my step 5, is you don't have to do this alone. And I know for a lot of us, we feel isolated because the only connection we seem to have is via, our mobile devices. But, it doesn't have to be that way. There's a lot of creative, inventive ways, and get yourself a squad. Get yourself other people where you'll be able to help them when they're feeling down. They'll be able to help you when you're feeling down. And then you've got that power of coming together. Now, I will say one of the things is this is an ideal time to learn about finances as well, because when you think about the world being rewritten, a lot of it is being rewritten around finance and money as well. A lot of it too is just the language. Don't be intimidated by the language. It's so funny. When I was in New York, I met some people at a networking meeting, and they were talking about, oh, I do arbitrage marketing. And it was like, oh my God, I'm in arbitrage for Goldman Sachs, blah, blah, blah. When I drill down in what is arbitrage, it's something our uncle and aunt do at flea markets. They buy low, they sell high. That's it. And so don't be intimidated by it. There's vocabulary, kind of peel that away. But especially money moving so fast, and it's moving differently, especially globally, please take some time to learn about it. Now, the next few years are going to be tremendous opportunity of change, but please make sure that you take some time to learn about what's going on with finance, what's going on with financials, markets, and what's going on with your own personal money. Make sure you take some time and get yourself a buddy. I know sometimes it's really hard for us to share where we are financially. Find somebody you really trust. Could be somebody in your family, but you would be surprised. I know I've helped friends renegotiate their mortgages and to save hundreds of thousands of dollars on their mortgages just because they didn't know. And I was happy to do it. I'm like super happy to do that. So anyway, make sure that you've got people in your network that can help you. Now, there's a lot of great stuff about technology, but I also want to mention, free isn't free. Even the CEO, the board chair of Google says free is not free. You have to think about who is the customer and who is the product. When you get excited and you get to use a free tool, you think, oh, this is so fun, it's free. Well, in that case, you're the product. And sometimes that's okay, but many times it's not. And it can have tremendous consequences for you and your kids as well. And so you've got to be, again, digitally savvy to understand that. And so many of our kids are really being affected by technology. So it's really important that you learn and you get more involved in that. So as I mentioned, you don't have to go become an engineer. You don't have to become a programmer to learn and to learn about these things and to be more involved. And it's especially if you have kids. Oh my goodness, it's so important. And the number one thing to think about, if I haven't paid for this product that's so fantastic, or this game that my kid is playing all the time, it's free. It's not free. Your child is the product. They really do see your child as the attention units they're selling, and they'll do all sorts of things to keep making sure that they're touching the brain, their dopamine, so that their child just stays on that. And so these are really important things to be, and I know it's really tough to get kids unhooked from their mobile devices, but that's one of the things that you need to make sure that they have more balance there. So one of the other things is, with all this remote that you're thinking, oh, this is so great. I get to work from home. I'm loving this. I'm never going to the office. Here's the challenge, and I want all of you to sort of really take stock in this, is that was the first wave, what they call disaggregation. Is they've disaggregated it from corporate office, and they've learned that, wow, we can be really productive having people outside. They don't have to live in high expensive areas like Austin or San Francisco. They can live in lower cost areas. The thing is, that job, if they figured out that it can be somewhere else, it may be somewhere else outside the United States. And so the next step is, you've got to make sure that your bosses and your leadership understand your value add. It's not that you're just like, okay, great, you just told me what to do, I did it, done. No, because if you just have that kind of relationship, you're going to be one of those jobs that can be outsourced outside the US to a lower cost market. So it's very important that you let people know what your value add is, because those are the kind of jobs in the next wave that are going to go. The other thing is, things are changing so dramatically that you think about things like, you hear about Airbnb and you hear about Tesla, and you think, there's no way that Tesla, which doesn't even make 500,000 cars a year, could be worth more than Ford, Volkswagen, Toyota, and all those companies combined. But the thing is that Tesla isn't just figuring out another way to move a vehicle instead of using gas, using another source. It's rethinking the entire experience. It's more of a supercomputer on an end node of a network. That's like, what? That's not a car. But guess what? That is, they are creating that market. The same thing with Airbnb. They really figured out how to handle inventory in a very different way. And they basically have no capital expense, because if we're doing Airbnb, somebody else is creating the room and the space, and they've just figured out how to market that. So sometimes you think, well, I'm waiting for these things to come back down to earth. When that happens and you see stocks like that, industries like that, that is a signal to you that there's a fundamental change happening in their market. And the narrative really matters there. And Tesla is really pushing innovation, so much so that they've even got a Tesla on its way to Mars. Now, one of the things I also want to talk about is education. Again, that is what is being dispersed and disaggregated work, right? And, we know our ticket as Latinas to a better life is through education for ourselves and our family. But here's our challenge, is the people that are making decisions about who gets to have in-person learning versus everybody done remote, a lot of times isn't us. And depending on the age level, particularly younger kids, they need that in-person learning. But a lot of times the people who are going to be spending our tax dollars are being influenced by people who just want to hand our kids a tablet. And this is where you and I, each one of us, have to be involved. We've got to be able to say, you're spending our tax dollars. The best way for my child to learn, especially if they're younger, is going to be largely in an in-person environment. Again, as you get older, there are still going to be things that are better in an in-person environment. And then there are things that are, you can kind of flip the model. It's easier to do some work offline, but then get online. Make sure your child, and make sure the decision makers are aware and that that game. You can't let them just say, well, guess what? Everything's going to go offline. Especially as we're coming back from COVID, you're going to see a lot of pressure for them to say, oh, we're saving taxpayers' dollars. We're just giving every kid an iPad. And our kids may not be at the cognitive level. They may not have the social skills to be able to understand what they're doing. They may not have the social capital, the educational skills. And you've got to insist that those tax dollars get spent age appropriately. Because I see this huge shift where all these profit-oriented companies are coming in, and they'll do research studies on just a handful. They'll make sure they invest well in politicians, and our kids will suffer, and we can't let that happen. So remember, technology is great, but it's not always the best tool, educational tool for kids at all levels. So, be honest about how your family uses technology, but also make them put the thing down and talk with you. It's not just about chat. It is about real life experiences. And when a child has really gotten stuck on a mobile device, it's really difficult for them, but it's so important because the people who are going to be making the decisions are people who have those social skills. So one of the things I'd like to ask you to do is kind of what I do is how do I track my time? And then when I see where I'm spending time, I figure out, where can I maybe make some additional investments? Or if I say, gosh, I don't know where my time went, it's really important that you do that. And that you maybe don't watch 30 minutes of TV just once and say, or Netflix or your favorite series. And instead, I'm going to ask you to take that time and dream. Take that time just for yourself and to say, what do I want next year to be like? What do I want the next 5 years, the next 10 years? And then I want you to really feel what that would be like. Because when you do that, you begin to draw that. So the step 6 is going to be visualize. So like I said, put a pause on that Prime Video series and just let yourself dream. What do you want? How do you want to feel about yourself? How do you want to feel about your family? How do you want your family to feel about themselves? And I want you to really feel it, imagine it. And I want to give yourself permission. You can dream to be whatever you want to be and own it. It's your own dream. And you'll find that you'll be there before you know it. May not happen in a year, but you'd be surprised what can happen in the next 5 or 10 years. Now, I'm so grateful for comadres like yourself and certainly Nora, who are just persistent and dogged and they don't quit on their support for Latinas. I love that. So I'm going to ask you also to extend that to your own personal relationships. This is the year that you lengthen your stride just a little bit more. Just lengthen your stride, and, take advantage of the power of who we are. When you're enrolling your child in school, make sure you meet the principal and the teachers. When you're doing a big project and you have to go to a store or you have to open an account at a bank, you know what? Make the time to meet the manager. They need to know you. You know what? If your nonprofit is banking at a bank and they don't know who you are, that's not good. You need to go and say, I want to meet the manager. Did you know our nonprofit has $150,000 that goes through your bank every year? So think about it. You're a $150,000 account to that bank manager. So whenever you're doing, think of yourself that way. And as you think of yourself and think about all of us, holy cow, the economic value, the power of our purse for Latinas is immense, is absolutely immense. So remember, these people, they work for you. And when you're meeting with the board of trustees, I encourage you to do that. Don't let them intimidate you. You've got to be meeting with those folks, attend those sessions so that they know who you are and you're using your voice. But also do it in a spirit of the final step, which is to do it in a spirit of being grateful. And, here in California, we've got lots of challenges and our governor's trying hard. There's some things he's done really well, some things he hasn't done really well. But you know what? He was under tremendous pressure to not appoint a Latino or a Latino as US Senator. And I'll tell you, when he named Alex Padilla, I called his office, I sent emails, I had my California network to send him emails and to thank him. Because it's important to express gratitude along the way. Because the kind of change you can make when you're in that, people can hear you better when you're grateful. Well, I can go on forever and I have another story to tell, but I know we're already at our half hour. Nora, I think, one of the things that I was so grateful to Nora is that we made so much transformation. She said, people in Austin still ask about me, and I'm so grateful for that. And it's true, I still get calls all the time. But that's because we came together and the power was just so transformative. And I'll just end with one example. The Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders was starting in Austin. And when they had started it in Dallas, the equivalent, they just hadn't had the pickup in the Latino market. And they said, wow, this is going to be like a private school and a public school for all these girls. Nora and I teamed up. And we, I think, went to, I don't know how many of the schools, 80, 90 of the schools, talking to the parents about this opportunity. I think Nora and I, we went on the radio. My voice, I know I almost lost it. But what is so amazing is that when that school opened up, because Austin at the time was about 60% Latino students, that school opened up with 62% Latinas. And there had not been another magnet school. Other magnet schools in Austin at the time, less than 10% Latinos. This magnet school, 62%. And that was an excellent school, such a great school that it's an exemplary school. It's the only diverse school in the entire state of Texas that has been exemplary all these years. And it still has more than 50% Latinas. And so I think it's now more than 10 years going. And I just think of all the transformative lives that have happened because of that. So Nora, your leadership, I'm just so grateful for that. And so are those families. Well, I just want to end with a recap of the 7 steps, right? So the first one is be confident. Second is excellence is the great differentiator. Step 3, persistence. 4, be fluent in the digital tools and access. 5, get your squad. You don't have to do this alone. Step 6, visualize and feel your future. Feel your future. And step 7 is express gratitude. And with that, I will now end expressing gratitude to all of you who joined us all over for this evening's talk, for the inaugural speech. So thank you very much. And I think, Nora, you're going to head off and look at some of the Q&A.
Let's see. Well, one of the first things, Sylvia, that I want to ask you, because we just talked with, first of all, it was wonderful, and I'm ready to read the book. Okay. I've been pushing the leadership book for a while, and I think you're on the road there. But I wanted to ask you about, let's see what my first question was. I lost my place here. We interviewed Maria Hinojosa recently about her book, Once I Was You. And one of the things she talked about was the imposter syndrome. Was that something that you ever faced? Did you ever have a lack of confidence?
I think I'm so grateful. That's one of the reasons, I gave 12 years of my life, 8 years on the board, 4 years in Girl Scouts as the CEO, because that cookie program gave me a lot of confidence. And I had a really good troop leader. She told me never walk away from a sale until you heard no 3 times. And that was so impactful because to me, that was a secret to the world. One, I'd come from a monolingual Spanish speaking household. So she knew, I probably hadn't spoken to a lot of adults outside of my little circle. And she gave me permission to be persistent, and it paid off. I saw how it paid off. And so as that 7-year-old girl, I began flexing that muscle. When I heard no, I'm like, okay, I don't hear no, I'm going on. And that really helped me in my life. So I will say that gave me the confidence because, in middle school, I'd been told no. I was supposed to take home ec, and I didn't want to take home ec just because I was a girl. And they told me I have to, and I said no. And guess what? I didn't have to take home ec, right? So, and then in middle school, in high school, there were all these other things. So I try to find the way. And even my book, when Path to the Spars was coming out, the publisher told me, that it couldn't come out in Spanish at the same time. And I'm like, why not? And they said, well, we just don't do that. We wait until we get the results of how many. And I said, no. And I said, why can't it? And finally it got down to money. And I'm going, well, then take it out of my advance. I don't, what was more important to me was getting the book out there at the same time in Spanish. So you've got to figure out how to get to that yes. And so I think I have a lot of confidence of getting to that yes.
Wonderful. Remember that, ladies. Okay, a question. I wanted to ask you about persistence. That's one of the first traits that you mentioned. What does persistence look like, Sylvia? Because I think some people are afraid of pushing. They don't know how to do it, and they say, "Oh, what's going to happen to me if I ask too many times?" Or what does persistence look like to you?
So it's interesting. One is that don't walk away from a sale or from an opportunity till you've heard no 3 times. So that is it. The other thing is, if you're doing something and you keep getting the same result, it's time to step back and to figure out, well, how might I do this a little differently? So as I mentioned, when I wanted to move into that global opportunity, I kept doing it the traditional way and the doors kept closing around me. So I took a step back and I'm like, how can I get around this obstacle? And that's because I knew, especially when I saw most of those people working in Latin America didn't even speak Spanish, right? And I'm like, I knew I could do that. Like they just were gatekeeping me out. So that drive allowed me to push through. But you have to, if you're getting the same no, you got to figure out how can I approach this differently to get to a yes.
Okay, so let me ask some of the Comadres questions here. One of the questions is, did religion play a part in your experience?
That's a really important question. Okay, so what's really different about me is that we were not raised Catholic. We were raised Southern Baptist, which is really unusual. And I know that. And so as a result, that kind of, Protestant makes, you're going to make it happen. You can create it. That was part of how we grew up versus kind of that feeling of guilt. And, it's sort of how it was going to be, your life already had a path. So my older brother and I have talked a lot about that really did differentiate with us because being raised Southern Baptist was really different. And it's interesting because my family in Mexico, it's one of the reasons my paternal grandfather came to the US. He was a wealthy landowner in Mexico, but he was Protestant, not Catholic. And so when Pancho Villa in that famous time came to Chihuahua, the army did not protect him. They protected all the Catholics, but not him. And he lost everything. And so he came to El Paso Juarez penniless. So yeah, that religion, that's an important question. And I think that really did change a little bit of our outlook as well.
Okay. I remember there's many parts of your book that I remember, Sylvia, but one of them is about peanut butter. What's your relationship with peanut butter today?
Oh no, that had to do with making peanut butter cookies. And that actually helped me get on the path of science because I made galletas de cacahuate using my mom's cookbook, and it was in Spanish. And having maybe too much confidence, I didn't ask her to help me, even though she had offered. And I'm like, I got this. And I misread one of the ingredients, and I put a cup of salt into the peanut butter cookies, and they tasted horribly. And to this day, my older brother will never taste anything I make until I tasted it or somebody else, because he took the first bite of the peanut butter cookies and it was a chemistry lesson because they looked the same, they smelled the same, but they didn't taste the same. So yeah, I should have asked my mom. I was a little too proud, a little too confident. So I learned that lesson.
Okay. Let's see. I know that you're an entrepreneur and that you've started many companies of your own. How do you go about setting up an idea like that requires a patent? something where you need to do something that's really outside of your experience, though it may not be necessarily outside of yours, how do you recommend people take that particular step?
Oh gosh, I'll tell you, I even feel really bad about this. It's so important. You're going to have to, if you have something that is as important as a patent, you've really got to get professional expertise. So whether you figure out how to get a lawyer to help you and to do it at a much lower cost, or if you're willing to pony up the dollars for that, but that's really important. I was mentoring a nice young Latino who had a great idea, and I kept telling him to patent it. And he got so excited that he um, went and interviewed for a job at Uber, and he explained his idea. And they were so excited, and he went on and on about his idea. Do you know, it's been 6 months and they've not called him. And I'm pretty sure in a very short amount of time, they've incorporated his idea. And, you know, he didn't protect himself. And I get it. As an entrepreneur, you want to get your baby out in the world, but you have to protect your baby. So you've got to figure out a way. Sometimes if it's a technology idea, I know UT has incubators and they can be really helpful. And I would really network, not to share your ideas, saying you have something that's valuable and who could help you. Because unfortunately, you'd be surprised. You can sometimes, especially Latinos, one of the things we have because of our bicultural, bilingual brains, we know how to multitask. We know how to put ideas together in different ways. People who have been raised in a monocultural world haven't. So things we take for granted of how to problem solve, that's like new to them. And a lot of times we create solutions that we go, oh, it's nothing. I did this. No, it's a huge thing that you've done. I've seen so many administrators that are Latina that have like reworked their entire work process. You know what? If they were the project manager, they would be making $250,000. But they're just the admin, right? No, you guys, because of our brains, our bilingual, bicultural capability, we can problem solve in much different ways. And so you may have ideas that you think aren't that valuable, but they're immensely valuable. And you can patent a process. You really can. I mean, have you ever gone to a restaurant and those little paper circle sticky things? That's patent. Come on. You know, there's a lot of things that can be patented.
Mhm. Okay, so now let me ask you the question about invest in yourself.
Mhm.
What does that mean? Is that put dollars into an education? What does it mean?
I still am doing that. Hey, y'all, you know, I'm still taking classes. I'm taking classes on strategy. I'm taking classes on brand. I'm signed up for a class on platform. I'm like, how do these companies, the platform companies, how do they make money? How do they think about it? I'm still learning. I still make that investment in myself. You know, I'm a curious person, but I also obviously like it, but it's important to invest. Now, sometimes, you know, you can do it in a way that costs a lot of money. Other times you can look for lower cost credentialing types of ways. You don't have to go back. Like right now, I'm not going back and getting an MBA, but I am going back and taking specific classes that can kind of get me up to speed with what people who are graduating now are learning. So I know Nora Community College, that's one way. Online's another way. Don't, you know, you guys, think about investing in yourself. That really does help you professionally. If there's a certification, even better. But it really is important that you do that. Now, there are a lot of free resources available, especially through, you know, public libraries, and I really encourage you. There's a lot of great stuff also sometimes on YouTube. There's a lot of also not so great stuff on YouTube. So make sure that you're really learning from kind of the best, or people who are credentialed or somehow certified that they really are experts in that. But it's important to do that.
So do you
And
still?
don't be afraid with great online classes. Don't be afraid to ask for scholarships, or if you can get it at a lower cost. You'd be surprised how many times the people will say yes if you need it at a lower cost.
Great. Do you still daydream?
Oh my gosh, all the time. Oh my goodness, I still do. I recently became a corporate director. I have been of a major technology company. I knew probably about 2 years ago, I saw what was happening in technology, and there were not, our Latinas voices are not there. And what we were doing at Girl Scouts is making sure all these girls had all this great STEM opportunities. And I realized I need to get back into technology. And so I began daydreaming about that and focusing on that. And just recently, I'm thinking, holy cow, I've been wanting to be a corporate director of a major tech company for decades, and here I am. So now it's time to dream even new dreams and bigger dreams.
Wonderful. I hope it includes us. Okay, so here's a really good question that came up. How do we get more Latina girls into STEM?
Okay, so that's really important. So, at Girl Scouts, we really focused on how we could do that. So here's the bottleneck. Most STEM programs have been designed to get boys interested in the topic quickly. Okay, so and I'll give an example of Legos. So most boys of middle class and above have gotten Legos by the time they're 3. All right, so Legos, they're, if you think about it, they're gender neutral, they're playful colors. So a lot of curriculum has been developed around Legos. So say you're a second grade teacher and you say, I want to get girls interested in STEM, and I want them to do that. And I think I'm going to do it using Legos because Legos are gender neutral, right? So she introduces an exercise on STEM with Legos. The boys get excited. They've been doing Legos since they were 3. The girls, not so much. And the girls normally, as you know, young girls tend to be really quick in school, but they see boys really gravitate to this. And they see them doing it really well and really fast. And so what do the girls think? I guess I'm not good at STEM. And what does the teacher say? I chose a gender neutral. I guess they're not good at it. So what we discovered at Girl Scouts was get something that the girls are familiar with. So what's important is first you have to get their interest. Once they're interested, then you can work on their confidence. And once they're confident, then you can work on the competence. So if you think about that Lego example, boys were interested already and they were confident. They've been playing since they were 3. Now they're working and showing the competence. The girls, they're not even sure they're interested in Legos. So interest, confidence, and competence wasn't there. So what we did was we began to use examples to teach STEM concepts around things that girls were interested in. So a great example is in cybersecurity. How did we get girls to learn about malware and viruses? And you're like, networking, and you're like, wait a minute, Sylvia, you're talking about 7 and 8-year-old girls. They're not going to be interested. But what we did instead is we got girls to sit in a circle and to talk with each other. So any of you who have 7 and 8-year-old nieces or granddaughters or daughters, you know that you put 7 and 8-year-old girls together and they begin to talk to each other. And then what we did is gave them a ball of yarn, and then they passed that ball of yarn to one another as they talked to one another. And in a few minutes, you had a physical network. That ball of yarn was a physical network. And then you could say, look, Nora talked to Sylvia and to Maria, but Maria and Nora did not talk. But yet, how did Nora's virus get to Maria? Well, because it expanded through the network. So girls get that concept really quickly in a way that's like, it's no big deal, right? I get cybersecurity, I get malware, I get viruses, I get network. And, another example was how we got girls into robotics. So if you think about a bell curve, and I admit I'm on the far end of a bell curve, some girls are interested in robots, okay. But the middle of the bell curve, those girls were not interested in robotics. So that we were challenged of how do we get more girls interested? So again, what we know is girls like to help and to help others. And so here's what we did. There's an elephant herd in Africa led by a matriarch elephant with many baby elephants in the herd. The matriarch elephant, the leader of the herd, gets ensnared in a hunter's trap and loses a limb. Unless you create a robotic leg for that matriarch elephant. She dies, the herd dies, including all the baby elephants. Now we had girls who had never shown any interest at all in robotics. They wanted to save the baby elephants. And so you've really got to figure out, how do you make STEM resonate to them in a way that's relevant to them and their lives, right? Cybersecurity, a lot of girls cared about cybersecurity because they cared about the Internet of Things and losing their privacy, or their grandmothers, their family being frauded by online frauders. They wanted to know about cybersecurity. So that's how we got them interested. So when you want to get girls interested, you've really got to push back on the kind of curriculum that they're learning, because if they're just taking curriculum that's been done for boys, it's only going to be the little tail end of the girls that are interested in that. You really want to figure out the curriculum and make sure the instructors are using examples that are relevant to girls.
Great. So Sylvia, going from STEM and getting girls kind of into this whole thing, how do we get more Latinas on corporate boards?
So yes, that is so important. And right now I'm taking lots of notes, because that is really key of, it's sort of like, how did I get here? And what is it going to take for others to get here in mass? And, I know there's a Latino corporate directors group. I think that's kind of a first step, asking corporations, but being prepared. It's a heavy responsibility as well. It's not just like, hey, I get to be a corporate director. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility as well. You are ultimately the end responsibility of a company. It's not just the CEO, it's the board of directors. But that said, figure out, what industry that you're in, what's the expertise, and then you've got to be able to start networking. Who are the gatekeepers? How do you make yourself known? Those things are really, really key. A note to everybody, LinkedIn matters a lot. LinkedIn matters a lot. So making sure your profile is really professional is going to be key. And then working with organizations like Latino Corporate Director, when you're going for a board, it's not a resume. Your bio, your CV is different than a resume. That's got to be, you've got to prepare all that kind of paperwork. So it's interesting. I'm really taking a lot of notes on my journey because I want to help others along this path as well.
So would you tell us, there's so much good information, Sylvia, really, it's a good thing we're taping this. What reading, what do you spend your time reading? I know we talked about watching TV and things like that, but what are some of the books? What are some of the things that you're using to keep you sharp?
I really try to read balanced views. So that's really important. So I read, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. And I also read the business. It's really interesting. I have found Forbes and Fortune to be sometimes a little bit more fact-based than sometimes some of the news sites. One of the books I recently read, Post-Corona by Scott, I can't believe I'm forgetting his last name, Galloway, is really great. He really writes about a lot of the shift going on, and that is so important. Understanding that, especially because the information shift is really also an economic shift, and it's important to know that. So, those are some of the things. Oh, The Economist, I read that as well. And I'm always constantly balancing because, like I said, free isn't free. And I know that's part of my investment on myself is, cancel the Hulu so I can buy, The Economist. You got to balance those things. But I do still have my Netflix and Prime.
Of course, we have to watch Selena, right?
Yes.
and many other wonderful. Go ahead.
You guys, one of the great trends going on is Uruguay. Uruguay, you guys, is going to just explode in the next 10 years. It is doing so many things right. And it is really becoming kind of the digital Switzerland for not just Latin America, but for a lot of the content in the world. So I bring that up because a lot of show productions are happening there. A lot of online e-learning is happening in Ottawa as well. So I also go, and Netflix has done this brilliantly, is they have created content locally. So some of the stuff that you watch from Mexico, from Brazil, from Spain, it's fantastic. And it also helps you improve your Spanish.
Wonderful. Now, I know this is a very important question, Sylvia. How do you go to sleep? How do you fall asleep at night? I know I read something about that in your book. How do you fall asleep?
So you're probably talking about numbers. Yeah. So numbers calm me down. And when you read the book, you'll see why I had it, kind of in a Cliff Note version. My father, very traditional Mexican father, Mexican male, and he and I really ran into each other quite a bit. And we had some good fights we had some fights when I was a child. And I found by doing my math homework that it got me into my other side of the brain. I didn't know that. All I knew was doing math calmed me down. Now I know it's because, you're using different parts of your brain. But as a result of that, math sort of became the way I sort of soothed myself. And I tell people, to give you an extent of, or kind of an idea of how difficult my relationship with my dad was, I did math so well, I became a rocket scientist. So there was a lot of math that I needed to do. But, he and I, we got together, when I graduated from college and went to Stanford. I don't think there was anybody prouder than my father.
Absolutely wonderful. Sylvia, we are so grateful for all the wisdom that you have shared. And I'm looking, and all of us here we're going to be following you. We're going to want to learn, and we want to be there for you. Anytime you need us, you just need ask. Maria will be around, I'll be around, and all of these wonderful women will be around. And we'll share their information with you so that you have access, and we'll share your website so that they can see you as well. But, being a New Mexico girl, do you prefer red or green chili?
Oh, that's the most important question of all. Yeah. So growing up in Las Cruces, New Mexico, right outside of Hatch, I can only answer that as green.
Wonderful. Well, mil gracias, comadre. Mil gracias.
Thank you to all of you. I am so grateful to all of you. Thank you for coming and spending some of your very precious time. Thank you.
Comadre Maria?
So we want